The James Show Podcast.
And I am so happy for the first time in 10 days, I get to give you good news on the flooding recovery in the Texas Hill Country. Now, it's not good as in yay, but it's good as in it stopped getting worse. How about that? And that's how bad this has been. The original reporting on it, I remember when it happened, it happened very early in the overnight on Friday morning of last week, on July 4th. And so I didn't really talk about it hardly at all that first day. I didn't realize the magnitude of it. There were just scant reports coming in. And I remember the body count just floored me. I was like, 24 dead from a flash flood? That never happens. Wow. Well, it just kept climbing. And I felt awful because every day I had to come in here and tell you that the number of our neighbors that we lost in this flood went up. And I was also super concerned about the number of missing, because just as recently as yesterday, the last number I had before I started the James Show for the Monday edition, they were still expecting over 170 missing. Well, I'm glad to tell you, for the first day that I come in, the number went up for the death toll just a little bit. 132 are now dead. But here's the positive news: 101 missing statewide. Now that's way too many. That's still scary as hell, but it is way better than 170. Because worst case scenario, just when we were talking about this yesterday, is the number where we were approaching 130 dead yesterday. The scary part was that number could double if all of these people who are missing aren't really missing. Now, I didn't get any description or explanation from the state on how the official number for missing went down by about 70 in the course of a day. I don't know. Were they all found? Were they not really missing in the first place? Was there some duplicate numbers? Was there a rounding error? I don't know. Don't care. I'm just glad it's not 170 anymore. 101 missing sounds a whole lot better. Now, that's a statewide number. 97 in the Kerrville area in Kerr County. So that's a significant drop. And I'm not ready to applaud the situation yet. Still a huge tragedy. Still the worst tragedy from a natural disaster that I've seen in Texas in my lifetime, I guess. But we still have, look, if you want to take the positive angle, just remember 12,000 volunteers showed up. That's in addition to all the, first responders and the National Guard and the cops and the firefighters and the paramedics and the people whose job it is. 12,000 fellow Texans took time out of their work life, took their own resources, put their own selves at risk to go down there and help. So there are still some bright spots to be had. It's just a terrible situation. 132 dead. Still heartbreaking. But I am so glad I get to finally come in and tell you, because I've been griping about this all week. Can't wait for the day to where I come in and things are actually getting better instead of worse. So good. We've crossed that. And I wanted to start with that because this happened a week ago, or a week and a half ago, I should say. And naturally, the national news isn't hardly mentioning it at all. Now, you and I, we're in Texas. We're in the middle of it. We're still recovering people and bodies and adjusting numbers. And we're still in the middle of it. The rest of the nation has kind of moved on. And, you can't really blame them. It's not happening in their backyard like it's happening in our backyard. We all either know someone that was affected by it or know someone who knows someone who was affected by it. And you just can't expect the news to stay on a story like this for 2 weeks. I mean, that just doesn't happen for hardly anything. And there's other things that have gone on since that happened to sort of knock it out. And really, there's no new pictures. There's no new events. There's nothing really new to report. Yeah, we're just digging out homes and people and animals and trying to clean up and recover. And so, I mean, there's some other nuancy things that are going on that I don't think the rest of the world cares about. They're thinking about lowering the water level of a nearby lake to see if that'll help with finding some of the missing people, which, wow, absolutely heartbreaking there. But I'm so happy to tell you we are down to just 101 people remain missing according to the state. And today is the first day. Here it is. This happened on the wee hours of July 4th. It took until July 15th that this story stopped getting worse. And man, every one of those people that's lost, though, the 132 dead, Well, I'm not forgetting you. I don't think the people that listen to WBAP are going to forget you. And all the other people that are suffering, all the families that are going to have an empty chair at Thanksgiving. Still terrible stuff. Still just unspeakable tragedy. And our hearts go out with you. And really, now, it's not just the families. It's the first responders. They're down there. I talked about this yesterday. They're down there. And how would you like it for your job today instead of doing what you're doing? What do? You work at a law firm. You work at a doctor's clinic of some sort. You work at a radio station. You work at a school. You work at the post office. Where do you work? Where do you work? Are you digging up dead children today out of the mud? No? Well, then count your blessings. Because some people have a terrible job, but it's got to be done. And they are doing the ugly, hard work down there still. So don't let it fall out of your heart just yet. We are not done with this. My next guest, Dr. Jeffrey Brodeur, coming back on from Rigaku. He's a regular guy we lean on for these foreign affairs situations. He has quite a list of credentials behind himself. He's a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear consultant at Rigaku. Welcome back, Dr. Jeffrey Brodeur. I'm going to pick your brain here because there was thank you very much. The press asked Trump some questions about the situation with Russia yesterday. And I guess him and Putin aren't getting along too well lately.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on and inviting me again. If I could, I'd like to start off as somebody who grew up in San Antonio and understands these flash floods and low water crossing. My thoughts and prayers go out to the flood victims, their families, communities, and the first responders that are doing the dirty work. Again, sympathies all the way around. I understand that, unfortunately, too personally. To answer your question, there are levers of power that most nation states have. Their diplomatic, information, military, and economic. President Trump has tried the diplomatic and the information to no avail, and I think that's frustrating. If I read President Trump correctly, he views this as a waste of humanity. People are dying every hour of every day and have for a little over 3 years now. And I think that's the frustrating piece. Putin, on the other hand, has his own agenda. He'll say what he needs to in order to do what he wants to.
Let me ask you, can you fill in the blanks here? I don't know if I just missed it when he said it, but I couldn't figure out who Trump is talking about. He says there's a country that has a bunch of our Patriot missiles that they're going to be giving to Ukraine. And I mean, maybe we'll be reimbursed by NATO. But here was the clip from yesterday that I'm asking you about, Dr. Jeff.
We have one country that has 17 Patriots getting ready to be shipped. They're not going to need them for them. So we're going to work a deal where the 17 will go, or a big portion of the 17 will go to the war side.
So who has 17 of our Patriot missiles they're about to hand over to Ukraine? Do we know?
I don't have access to that information. I will tell you that Patriot missile resupply in the last 20 to 25 years is focused on our friends and allies in the Middle East and protecting Israel. It may be a U.S. site that has the mission and the task and purpose to intercept ballistic missiles in protection for Israel, and it appears that that's less of a problem now than it was a month ago. So if I had to guess, I'd say they're just being redirected as a resupply mission. I understand the President Trump deal to read something a little bit differently. In other words, European NATO nations would purchase our weaponry and would turn around and donate them to Ukraine. That raised my eyebrow as a good idea. So the U.S. taxpayer is still on the hook, but not so much with that deal.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of foreign aid I prefer. I don't like the fact that we got to give out weapons to everyone who needs them. How about you buy our weapons so, we don't have to have a negative impact on the taxpayer and the citizens of America?
Well, you're absolutely right. You're spot on. I think the big difference to me is that when we donate, that comes from U.S. stockpile of an inventory that was purchased and earmarked for our military when we need it. And so when we take from that inventory, we accept a degree of risk if the president decides that he needs our military to go someplace else. In this case, it sounds like it's going to go from the manufacturer, not from our inventory, straight to NATO and then to Ukraine. I think that's a better way of balancing what we need and managing our risk and still supporting Ukraine.
We're talking with Dr. Jeffrey Brodeur from Rigaku about the situation with Russia. Trump says he's going to do some secondary tariffs if Russia doesn't get their head out of their backside. But we already have a ton of sanctions and tariffs and other, sort of diplomatic incentives going on. Would that help any?
The tariffs I would describe as just kind of poking the bear. It's really not going to influence, I don't think, Putin to do one thing or another. And as I look at the list of countries that would be impacted, we've got some friends and allies on that list. They can turn around their import-export strategy in the next 50 days. But countries like the Netherlands and Germany and Italy and India and South Korea and Japan those are pretty close allies, and they have the potential to be impacted as well. I think more to influence Putin's tactical decisions is providing either direct or in support to Ukraine and their ability to fight and win.
Yeah, and you mentioned Iran earlier. That's kind of a point that should be brought up a little more. We did that big bombing a little over a month ago, and we were told World War III is right around the corner, and this is going to escalate things, and your sons are going to be drafted into war. Hadn't heard a peep out of them, Dr. Jeff. Yeah.
I mean, it's like recess time bully out in the exercise yard. Yeah, you give them a bloody nose. There are people in areas of the world like Iran that only understand diplomacy that is described as crushing skulls. They understand violence. They understand strength. I think right now the regime in Iran is doing everything that they can, not to influence, but to survive. I think they're extremely vulnerable right now. And they certainly don't want to appear weak. If they appear weak and the citizenry, they smell a vulnerability, that country could implode, if you will. And you could see regime change coming from inside of the country. So I think I think Iran is going to say a lot of things. I'd be surprised if they do anything.
All right, Dr. Jeffrey Brodeur from Rigaku, I appreciate your insights on the foreign policy discussion today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good day.
Let me tell you some ugly truths here. As a fellow North Texan, I do not delight in the headline that the Karmelo Anthony trial has been set. Karmelo Anthony is the guy that's on trial for the fatal stabbing of the kid at the Frisco track meet, and it's set for June 1st, 2026. Now, I don't think they planned this as some sort of master plan where, hey, why don't you go stab this kid about a year and a half before the midterms so we can set up a perfect scenario for race riots. But I do think that when a big election's coming up, we've seen a pretty specific pattern that keeps emerging here where, hey, it's time to riot. What story that's already out there can we get our base ginned up about? What can we use to get them so inflamed and so angry that they need to chuck a brick through a window and go get some new Air Force Ones? By the way, old white people, Air Force Ones is a brand of sneakers. They wrote a song about it. Try and keep up. I feel like I said that and some people like my dad probably went, what do you mean? Like the plane that the president rides in? No, the shoe that Nelly sings about. Michael Jordan's. How about that? Sneakers. But look, the Summer of Love is most closely associated with the George Floyd's riots. But what I remember from right before that happened in an election year is they were trying to hype up the, what was his name? Ahmaud Arbery shooting. That was the dude that on one side they said, we're building some houses in this neighborhood and someone keeps coming by and stealing material and we've caught him on game cameras. And so this guy that's matching the description was running away from one of our sites. And so we stopped him and he attacked us. And so we shot him. And those guys actually ended up going to jail. Why? Because they brought a weapon to a neutral place and they exchanged harsh words with some guy. And apparently the jury thought that they used fatal force a little too quickly. It sounds a lot like the Karmelo Anthony trial, doesn't it? Some guy brought a weapon where it clearly doesn't belong, instigated a physical altercation. And I'm using very vague language here for a reason, so it'll fit both scenarios. And the guy with the weapon initiated fatal force where it just didn't seem to belong. So yeah, it's almost the same thing. The reason why they switched off the Arbery case and moved to George Floyd is because it wasn't divisive enough. That's the key. It doesn't just have to be a black person who is a victim of a white guy, or whether or not you think a victim, who's on the receiving end of violence from a white guy. Whether it's Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown or George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery, it can't be something that we all agree on because that's not divisive. And they don't want to hype that up. They don't want to hype up the stories because there are some where you and I would agree. Ahmaud Arbery was one of them where most people agreed that was a bad shot. There's the one that happened in, was that Pensacola? It was the Robert Fortson is his name. It fell out of the news because it didn't quite fit the narrative. Yes, there was a white cop who shot a black man who was doing nothing wrong, totally innocent, and it was a bad shot. Why isn't that hyped up? Well, because you and I, we have the body cam footage and we would agree, yeah, that's a bad shot. Well, Democrats can't have people seeing MAGA people and white people and people who are usually associated as their political adversaries taking the side of a black guy over a white guy, because then they would think, oh, well, these people aren't motivated by race. They just call balls and strikes. And so in these other situations, maybe we shouldn't dismiss their opinion on a Michael Brown or a George Floyd or a Trayvon Martin as simply racist, because they're proving that they're not simply racist when they go against the white guy in these other situations where it's a little more cut and dry. They can't have them seeing that. They have to make their voters think that you're a closet Klansman. This is Mississippi burning in 1949 or whenever that was. So Karmelo Anthony fits the bill. Perfect. It's one where Karmelo Anthony clearly in the wrong, but there seems to be a racial line that is drawn where the tribal nature takes over and the blacktivists, I'm not saying all black people, just the ones that make this part of their identity and their activism, the Dominic Alexanders of the world, got the first phone call from the family. That turned it in to the next predicate for a summer of riots. Right there. So here's what a lot of people are predicting. Karmelo Anthony's going to have a trial in June of next year. It's not going to last that long. He's going to be convicted. And then there's going to be race riots. And the timing's going to be perfect, impeccable, because there is a midterm election next November. And that is the one prize that Team Blue is salivating at. How can we get our band of miscreants to go out and riot, and not just riot, be angry, be as mad as possible going into the midterm elections? This is it. This is perfect for that mindset. It's perfect for the mindset of the media who goes out there and they're like, hey, man, we have our worldview that's already established that white people are evil and black people are being oppressed. They're victims of white oppression. But, you know, if you go out there and you just report the news in a sterile, non-biased manner, no one will come away with that conclusion. Look at all the crime that happens. And like downtown Fort Worth has 1/5 the crime as downtown Dallas. Now, what proportion, what ratio of that violence do you think is white on black versus black on white? Which one do you think is bigger? Right. So there's such a shortage of actual stories that fit the narrative. You would think they would change their worldview, but instead they just focus on that tiny, almost exception to the rule level of stories. Now, let me read how this is playing out. I'm kind of running out of time. When we come back, I'm going to read some comments on a couple of articles about this, and not let you know what the media is saying, not letting you know what the talking heads are saying, but the commenters under it, that's what your neighbors are saying. That might be what you're saying. That might be what your Team Blue sister-in-law says, or your daughter that's in college right now. She may disagree with you. But you're going to hear from both sides on this, and I think we're going to spell out pretty clearly that we are headed for another summer of riots after Karmelo Anthony gets convicted next year, now that we have the trial date set for June 1st, 2026. And about a year from now, you're going to hear me do shows over the Karmelo Anthony trial because it is slated to begin June 1st, 2025. A lot of people think that's suspicious because, hey, you're right. Thank you for the correction. 2026. I misspoke there. And a lot of people online are saying, wait, hang on a second. This isn't a quick and speedy trial. This is a deliberate scheduling to line up with the midterms because it's going to fit the political agenda, and they will now have the predicate, the excuse, the emotional train wreck to convince the slow-witted people in their fan base to riot. Hey, maybe it'll work, but this does seem to be kind of in line with how long these things take. You have seen when someone gets arrested for murder, they get a trial that starts in like 6 to 8 months, but I don't think that's the norm. Usually it does take about a year or so. And when did this happen? Back in, I guess, April, if I remember correctly. So maybe this is a coincidence. Maybe they didn't deliberately schedule it with the midterms in mind. However, I do foresee that they will take advantage of this interesting timing and see if they can get some riots to happen. Now, I'm not even sure if riots will work. At some point, the American people are going to get so sick of riots that they're going to have to stop doing them because it's not going to help in the court of public opinion. You can only burn down so many businesses and ruin so many lives before people realize that you're the bad guy. 800-288-9227 for your theory. Let me read you some of the ones that were in some of the comments I was reading in the article on X. Real Dill Mogilla says, I doubt it's planned. It's about the right amount of time it takes to get resolving a case like this, and I doubt this dude has that much support for there to be riots. Hard to take a guy's side that's so obviously wrong. Yeah, but isn't that what we said about Trayvon? Isn't that what we said about Michael Brown? Look, there's a little gray area in the George Floyd. I get it. But, Trayvon? Michael Brown charging a cop? He gets shot. It wasn't a hands up, don't shoot. That was the lie that witnesses made up to try and exonerate the guy that has the same skin tone as they do. God, that's evil. But Destin Winters over here on X says, they took Floyd and made him a folk hero, complete with statues and murals. This young man set out to harm or kill someone that day, and it hurts my heart that the Metcalves have to endure Austin's loss. But any amount of support for the evil he has committed without remorse of any kind. Oh, it's coming. We see they'll support evil. We see them right now supporting illegal immigrant criminals over the victims of their crimes, supporting the Palestinian terrorists of Hamas over the kids that were just trying to go to a music festival on October 7th. Oh, no. Don't put it beyond some of these people to overlook evil in the pursuit of a political gain. Another commenter, not me, not you, says, if there is a black on the jury, this is not my words, people, I don't talk like this. If there is a black on the jury, he will be exonerated no matter how obviously guilty he is. Blacks do not convict their own, especially when the victim is white. See, now that's too far. We have seen it happen. That you may say they're less likely to convict their own, or they have a harder time convicting their own, but don't just write it off. See, this is what happens when race gets thrown into it. People get emotional. Logic takes a back seat, and you get just awful takes like that. That person there says, good, riots will help Republicans. Now, that's an interesting take. Yeah, they're going to do it. They're going to set up. They're going to do riots, but it's not going to work this time. I don't know. It seems to work in times past. I guess there could be a shelf life on the effectiveness of riots, efficacy of riots. I don't know if we're there yet. 800-288-9227. What about John in Dallas? You're on WBAP.
Good afternoon. I actually am in law enforcement, and I do investigations for the state, and I have submitted multiple cases to Collin County DA for prosecution, and I know some of the DAs up there. And I'll say this honestly, that putting this race thing in mind is the furthest thing from the truth. First off, this guy is out on bond, so there's no rush that he's locked up and he can't get out, and we're keeping him locked up. Secondly, if the defense wants to let this go out so they have plenty of time to prepare for the case, and both sides are like, fine, do it, then that way there's no excuse that they were rushed or anything like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So being in law enforcement, and I know a lot of the DAs up there, there's no way that they'd be putting this race riot thing in their mind when setting this court date. They want to have these DAs, if the defense says, hey, we want a lot of time to prepare.
Right, but John, I think the race riots aren't going to come from the DAs or whatever, but not the Karmelo Anthony's, the Dominic Alexanders and the Al Sharptons and the other race hustlers in the world will take advantage of this convenient timing for their purposes. I'm not putting this on the DA at all.
Because they're the ones that said it. They're the ones that set the trial. The DAs, the defense, and the defense set the trial date. And so these people saying, oh, it's a conspiracy so we can riot next summer? No, I think most people are saying that they didn't do this on purpose, but this is going to be exploited because the timing is so convenient. It could be, but saying it's a conspiracy that they set it for this time so they could be riots? No.
No, I think most people agree with you. I agree with you on that one, John. I don't think the DA did it on purpose. I just foresee that there are going to be riots because this guy is going to be found guilty. This is my prediction. I don't know. Don't have a crystal ball. But I think he is, and I think this sets up a great platform for the rioters in our midst.
What if he's acquitted then? That's the other question.
Well, then there definitely won't be riots.
Yeah. I mean, but, I just... The timing of this about rioting, could there be riots after the fact if he's found guilty? And there's a chance he is. There could be some riots.
Well, if he's acquitted, there's not going to be any riots because we don't riot on the right side. We don't throw bricks through windows. That's not how we get free things from, I don't know, what would we riot? Bass Pro Shop, the Tannin Salon. All right, coming up next on the James Show, if you have any Karmelo Anthony theories, 800-288-9227. But Donald Trump was asked about the Epstein files yesterday again. And I think his response kind of swings that story in the other direction. You'll hear it next on The James Show. News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP.
The James Show Podcast.